There is a need for younger workers who are more flexible and less rigid. This is Douglas, my name. My age is 55, and I have spent the past 19 years in Dayton, Ohio, establishing the foundation of TriTech Solutions. I have been working here for the past 19 years. The words lingered in the atmosphere like smoke emerging from a disastrous electrical fire. Gavin Norris was sitting opposite me in his corner office, his fingers tapping across his MacBook as if he were coding code that he would never comprehend. When I arrived at this meeting, I was under the impression that it was yet another quarterly evaluation, as it was the same routine that I had gone through 76 times before, with the assurance of a man who had never spent a weekend addressing server breakdowns or explaining to scared customers why their automated systems had gone dark. Gavin instead offered what he called workforce optimization. He did this with the assurance of a man who had never done either of those things. As he continued, straightening his tie, he said, "You are tremendous, Doug, but it is absolutely necessary to streamline talent density." Every aspect of him shouted that he had attended an expensive business school and had no experience in the area. I did not dispute. I did not pound my fist on his glass desk, and I did not remind him that I had taught half of the individuals he was keeping. This is just business. I nodded. I just gathered my thoughts and responded. I see what you mean. On the other hand, as I made my way back to my cubicle, I felt a chill settle against my chest. I had been the man who made things work for the best part of 19 years. During the flood that occurred in the server room in 2018, I was the one who waded through water that was up to my ankles in order to retrieve the backup drives. As a result of integration difficulties, our primary client threatened to terminate their contract, and I spent 3 consecutive nights rebuilding their whole workflow system from the ground up. Not out of spite or concern for my job security, but rather out of necessity, I had developed proprietary scripts that automated vendor renewals, established internal bridges that connected incompatible software platforms, and documented important processes in ways that only I understood. In order to ensure that everything was working smoothly, I had to design my own processes because the company had never made an investment in basic documentation protocols. During the time that I was putting my personal belongings into a cardboard box, I became aware that Trevor, who worked at the help desk, was watching me with anxious eyes. Because he was 26 years old and had recently graduated from college, he had been asking me for several months to explain the sequences of back-end automation. I had assured him that I would train him appropriately once things began to ease down. There would be no time left any longer. He spoke softly and whispered, "Hey, Douglas. Could this truly be taking place?" I secured the box with tape and took one more look around the office before leaving. It would appear so. In addition to the fact that Trevor was unaware of this, none of them were aware of the fact that Gavin had just terminated the sole individual who had an understanding of how their entire infrastructure actually functioned. The scripts, the automation, the relationships with the vendors, and the methods for dealing with emergencies. Everything that I knew was stored in my head, as well as in files that were highly secured and required certain passwords to access. After exchanging handshakes with a few of my coworkers, I left without any formalities. Following a period of 3 weeks, things began to break. My intention was not to become an indispensable resource. It was supposed to be a temporary role when I started working at TriTech in 2005, while I was figuring out what my next step would be during that time. Due to the fact that my wife Janet had passed away the previous year, I was in need of a reliable job that offered satisfactory benefits in order to provide for my daughter Melissa while she completed her senior year of education. At that time, the company consisted of only 15 employees and offered only the most fundamental information technology services. On the other hand, I had 20 years of experience in systems integration from my former employment as an aerospace contractor, and I was able to recognize issues that others had overlooked. Harold Winters, the proprietor, was grateful to have at his disposal someone who could anticipate potential catastrophes 3 steps in advance. I eventually became the unofficial backbone of the organization. On account of the fact that the work was important and the people relied on me, I remained employed when Harold sold the company to a larger regional corporation in the year 2019. I had established relationships with each and every key vendor, negotiated contracts that provided the company with annual savings of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and developed automated processes that prevented the kinds of catastrophic failures that might destroy the trust of customers in an instant. But I had also observed several warning indicators throughout the course of the previous year. New management had brought in consultants who spoke in buzzwords and treated veteran staff as if they were expensive liabilities as a result of their behavior. By hiring younger employees at lesser salaries, they anticipated that these individuals would miraculously absorb decades' worth of institutional knowledge through the process of osmosis. 6 months previously, Gavin Norris had arrived, with credentials from a famous consulting business. Upon his arrival, he immediately began discussing the need of right-sizing and optimizing human capital. In order to simplify complicated technical procedures, he planned sessions with PowerPoint presentations that illustrated them with attractive pie charts. During a session that was particularly difficult, he had claimed that our bespoke automation scripts could be readily replaced with solutions that were available off the market. It was my intention to explain why that would not be successful. A significant portion of our clientele required specific integrations that could not be handled by regular software. The bespoke scripts that I had built throughout the course of my career were not merely useful tools for convenience. They were essential components of the infrastructure that prevented the failure of the system and the corruption of data. Could tell that Gavin was not paying attention to what was being said because he had took notes on his iPad and politely nodded his head. To him, I was nothing more than an elderly worker who possessed obsolete skills and a salary that was inflated. However, he failed to see the fact that such antiquated abilities had been the driving force behind the continued running of his company for almost 20 years. This is the server room that was never interrupted, the automated backups that were completely reliable. It was the relationships with the vendors that ensured priority help during times of emergency. I was able to create all of that because I had included redundancy into systems that other people believed to be unnecessary. The oblique warning indicators have been present for a lengthy period of time. There will be fewer invitations to gatherings for planning. Please provide me with precise record of the jobs I perform each day. There are inquiries on the possibility of my tasks being shared among the team members. The assumption I had made was that it was a typical business reorganization. But I had been mistaken. It was a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after I had been terminated, when I received the call. During the time that I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee and looking over job postings on my laptop, the number of Trevor showed on the screen of my phone. "I'm sorry to be such a nuisance to you, Douglas, but we are facing a significant challenge," he explained. His voice was tense and strained with fear. "Yesterday evening, the automated backup system experienced a failure, and none of us are able to find out how to manually restart it. My cup of coffee was placed down. Just what took place exactly? Until about 2 in the morning, everything was operating normally. From that point on, all of the automatic processes simply ceased. Gavin brought in some experts yesterday to look over your older scripts, and they made the claim that they could optimize them. However, nothing is working." At this point, my gut was filled with a sort of icy sensation. The scripts for the automation were altered by them. However, the system will not accept the vendor credentials at this time, despite the fact that they claimed they were simply cleaning up duplicate code. Error warnings are being generated by the backup protocols, and 3 customers have called this morning to report that they have experienced problems with data synchronization. I went to my window and stared out at the peaceful street in the suburbs while I was there. For a period of 19 years, I had incorporated safeguards into each and every system in order to prevent precisely this kind of cascade failure. In addition to being functional programming, the scripts were they were equipped with fail-safes, error-handling processes, and recovery mechanisms that had been perfected over the course of many years of trial and testing. I was wondering if there was any way that you, Douglas, could guide us through the process of recuperation. Trevor inquired about it. Gavin is in a state of complete stress. He is adamant that you must have sabotaged something before you went, and he keeps stating this. I was overcome with a peculiar sense of calmness. To be more precise, clarity rather than satisfaction. I never sabotaged anything, Trevor, but I also never disclosed the administrative passwords for the key systems because nobody ever requested for a full knowledge transfer. I never shared the credentials. May I ask what you mean? To function properly, the backup system necessitates the utilization of particular vendor authentication codes, which I negotiated with our service providers directly. For reasons of security, the automation scripts make reference to encrypted configuration files that are locked behind access credentials that I developed. Additionally, the manual recovery processes are written in files that require administrative capabilities in order to access them. The person on the other end of the telephone did not even make a sound. I went on to say that I had spent 15 years incorporating redundancy into each and every vital system. Nevertheless, redundancy is only effective if someone is able to put it into practice. Can you lend us a hand? Upon looking at the screen of my laptop, I noticed that there was an email from VectorCore Systems waiting for me in my inbox. They had extended to me an offer of employment as a senior integration specialist, which included a 20% rise in income and real regard for my previous experience. Although I am grateful that you called, Trevor, I would want to inform you that I am no longer employed at TriTech after all. Would it be possible for you to advise that Gavin get in touch with the vendors directly? On the other hand, it is highly likely that they will wish to renegotiate the service contracts. After I had finished my call, I sat in my kitchen for a considerable amount of time, contemplating the speed with which things may disintegrate if the incorrect component was removed. After 2 days had passed, the second call arrived. This time, Gavin was the only one involved. He spoke with a tone that was deliberately controlled and continued. Douglas, I believe there may have been some miscommunication about whether or not you were leaving. There are some technical issues that we are currently dealing with, and we would be grateful for your assistance. It was a call that I had been anticipating. Within the Dayton Tech community, word spread quickly, and I had already learned through mutual contacts that TriTech was losing customers at a rate that was greater than the rate at which their information technology team could provide reasons. So what really are the challenges? I inquired about it. Gavin swiftly responded that there were no major concerns because there were only some integration issues with the automated systems. I had hoped that you might be prepared to advise on a temporary basis in order to assist in making the changeover go more smoothly. In my recliner, I sat back and relaxed. Through the window of my home office, I was able to observe my neighbor mowing his lawn in a meticulous and quite precise manner. With regard to the scenario, what are the thoughts of your current team? It is true that they are gaining information, but it is also clear that you possess institutional expertise that might greatly speed up the process of settlement. The fact that 3 of TriTech's 5 major clients had already filed formal complaints about system problems and that 2 more were threatening to terminate their contracts was something that Gavin did not mention. Essentially, the consultants that he had brought in to improve my scripts had damaged every important automation process, and as a result, the company was now operating on manual procedures that nobody truly understood. I would want to express my gratitude to Gavin for the offer, but I have already accepted a position with Vector Core Systems. I will begin on Monday. A brief pause transpired. The Vector Core? However, they are our direct rivals in the market. My response was that they are a professional corporation that places a high value on experienced staff. More specifically, they are the kind of business that is aware of the distinction between optimization and destruction. The tone that Gavin used changed. Any proprietary knowledge or trade secrets that you developed while working at TriTech are not permitted to be shared with other businesses that are in direct competition with you, Douglas. We have legal safeguards in place to protect us. I became aware of a tightening in my jaw. Are you trying to intimidate me? I am merely bringing to your attention the obligations that are outlined in your contract, and I feel it is important to draw your attention to the fact that there may be severe legal repercussions in the event that these current technical challenges are the result of intentional sabotage. This accusation lingered in the air like a cloud of poisonous smoke. For the past 19 years, I had been responsible for safeguarding this organization against catastrophes that could have ruined their reputation and cost them millions of dollars. Gavin was implying that I had purposefully ruined my own job, despite the fact that I had worked on weekends, holidays, and vacations to guarantee that their systems remained stable. My statement was, Gavin, allow me to make something very clear to you. Because you terminated my employment with only 2 hours' notice, I was never given the opportunity to properly transmit important system knowledge. Despite the fact that I never sabotaged anything, I was never given the chance to do. There were standard documentation protocols that we offered. You conducted an exit interview with me that lasted for 20 minutes, during which you requested that I jot down my passwords on a post-it note. As a response, I stated that this is not documentation, rather, it is neglect. Following the conclusion of the call, I sat in my office and pondered the speed with which respect might swiftly transform into desperation. I had been sacked by Gavin because I was out of date and unwilling to adapt. At this point, he was accusing me of sabotage since his relatively new crew was unable to comprehend the systems that they had previously deemed to be antiquated. But the reality was much less complicated than sabotage. I had developed systems that were both reliable and secure, and their operation and maintenance needed a specialized set of skills. By removing the individual who was responsible for the construction and maintenance of such systems, without ensuring that sufficient knowledge transfer takes place, you are creating single points of failure that can lead to a complete breakdown of operations. Gavin's claims were undoubtedly making the situation much more difficult, which was an ironic turn of events. In the event that he informed customers and suppliers that a dissatisfied former worker had attacked their systems, he was, in essence, admitting that the security and documentation measures that they had in place were insufficient. There is no enterprise client who would like to learn that the infrastructure of their service provider is dependent on the goodwill of employees who have been terminated. Upon opening my laptop, I immediately started getting ready for my first day of work at Vector Core Systems. In particular, they had chosen me due to the fact that I had previous expertise dealing with difficult integration difficulties and that I had a reputation for constructing dependable systems. They desired to gain knowledge from my expertise rather than trying to replace it with less expensive options. It wasn't until I ran into Steve Harrison in the grocery store on Saturday morning that I realized the full extent of the catastrophe. At Meridian Analytics, which is one of TriTech's oldest clients, Steve worked as a project manager for the company. In addition, he appeared to have not slept for some days. After dropping his shopping cart to corner me near the fruit area, he whispered, "Douglas, I am so grateful that I was able to locate you. Do you have any knowledge what is going on at TriTech in regard to the situation?" I went with a bag of apples and made an effort to appear unpretentious. Would I be able to tell? My employment there has come to an end. That is what I was told. And to tell you the truth, it sheds a lot of light on the situation. Over the course of the past 4 days, our entire data synchronization system has been offline. At each and every one of our support calls, they assure us that they are working on the issue, but nothing ever gets resolved. The day before yesterday, a consultant made an attempt to persuade us that the issue was on our end. He ran his fingers through his hair while Steve did so. For the past 8 years, we have been working with TriTech. Up until last week, we had not experienced a single big outage. As a result of our inability to send reports to our own customers, we are currently considering the possibility of incurring contract penalties. I felt a weight that was familiar to me in my chest. Meridian Analytics was responsible for processing financial data for insurance businesses in the community. In the event that their reporting systems were unavailable, it would set off a domino effect that might have an effect on thousands of policyholders and claims processors. Steve, have you given any thought to expanding your search to include other service providers? I inquired about it. Despite the fact that we are already in discussions with 3 different firms, one of which is Vector Core Systems, switching suppliers will require us to design our whole integration architecture from the ground up. Months of labor, enormous expenses, and there is no assurance that the new system will function properly in comparison to the one we had. Something that Steve was unaware of was the fact that the system that he was praising had been designed by me. The bespoke integration protocols that I had developed over the course of 2 years enabled Meridian's old software to communicate without any interruptions with TriTech's cloud infrastructure's cloud infrastructure. Data validation, error correction, and real-time synchronization were all activities that were done by the automation scripts without any intervention from a human being. On the other hand, those scripts had been constructed with the help of confidential algorithms and security protocols that I had designed expressly for the purpose of high-volume economic processing. It was not a normal off-the-shelf solution that any consultant could comprehend or change without taking months of rigorous examination into consideration. I would like to ask you a question that is confidential, Douglas. As Steve spoke, he brought his voice down. Do you believe that this will exist forever? Should we start exploring for other options, or is there a possibility that TriTech can find a solution to this problem? The phone call that Gavin made, his allegations of sabotage, and his threat of legal action were all things that sprang to my mind. My mind wandered to the consultants who had disregarded the 19 years of institutional expertise as meaningless code. When I thought about Trevor and the other younger staff members, I realized that they were probably working around the clock to find solutions to problems that they had never been taught to manage. I told Steve that I was unable to provide advice regarding the choices you make in your firm. I will, however, state this. Maintaining a steady supply of knowledge and skills is necessary for complex technical systems. You create risks that can take months or even years to properly resolve when you disturb that continuity without first ensuring that suitable transition planning has been developed. Grimacing, Steve gave a nod. This is exactly what I was worried about. When I was driving home, I came to the realization that the situation was even more dire than I had initially thought it was. It was not just a matter of scripts that were malfunctioning or automations that were fail. TriTech had constructed their entire business model on the basis of technological capabilities that were dependent on my experience, and they had destroyed that competence without fully comprehending the repercussions of their actions. With Meridian's example, more customers would follow suit. There was a rapid spread of information throughout the local business community, and nobody wanted to put their operations at risk by relying on service suppliers that were not reputable. Gavin had attempted to reduce expenses by removing expensive senior people, but he had, in the process, ruined the fundamental value proposition that was responsible for TriTech's competitive capabilities. It was as if I had entered a different universe when I arrived at Vector Core Systems on Monday morning. I found myself in a contemporary office that had ergonomic workstations and enterprise-grade technology, as opposed to the tight cubicles and antiquated equipment that I had previously been working in. Rather from being disregarded as out of date, I was welcomed as a senior integration specialist whose experience may assist them in seizing possibilities in the market. It was clear that Patricia Wells, my new manager, had done her investigation. She was fully aware of the specific way in which I could contribute to the success of their organization. In the first meeting that we had, she mentioned to Douglas that we have been keeping a close eye on the situation at TriTech with a great deal of curiosity. We have received inquiry from a number of their customers regarding the provision of emergency migration services. We believe that it is important to handle these opportunities in an appropriate manner with complete respect for the borders of intellectual property and professional ethics. I admired her courage to speak her mind. The timeline that we are looking at is of what kind? There are currently 3 customers who have requested formal offers for the complete rebuilding of their systems. There are 2 more individuals who are requesting backup service arrangements while they consider their alternatives. It is possible that we might potentially capture the majority of TriTech's regional market share within a period of 6 months if we are able to demonstrate superior reliability and support. Upon the conference table, Patricia laid down the timelines for the various projects. The most important thing is to develop solutions that are objectively superior to what customers have had in the past, rather than simply replicating old methods. We would like to make use of your experience in order to design integration architectures of the future generation that will service these respective clients for the next 10 years. Exactly the kind of strategic thinking that had been lacking at TriTech was the kind that was demonstrated here. Rather than considering senior staff to be costly liabilities, VectorCore viewed them as advantages that could help the company compete well. As an alternative to attempting to replace knowledge with less expensive alternatives, they made investments in the development of more robust skills. Over the course of the subsequent weeks, I collaborated with the engineering team at VectorCore to generate integration proposals for clients who had previously worked with TriTech. While working within the limits of TriTech's resources, we were able to design systems that were more robust, more secure, and more scalable than anything I had been able to construct beforehand. I was aware of the existence of the irony. I had been fired by Gavin because I was out of date and unable to adapt to changing circumstances. But VectorCore was paying me 20% more to perform effectively the same work at a higher level of sophistication. Over the course of this time, the circumstances at TriTech continued to deteriorate. Trevor contacted me twice more, and both times he sounded more and more frantic than the previous time. Following the hiring of a number of consultants and emergency contractors, Gavin discovered that none of them were capable of completely restoring the automated systems. It seemed like every attempt to fix the issue resulted in new problems. Trevor told me that they brought in a man from Chicago who claims he can rebuild everything from the ground up, but he has been here for 2 weeks and nothing works better than it did when he first started. I had compassion for Trevor and the other junior staff members who were caught in the middle of this catastrophe. I felt sad for everybody. I was unable to assist them since doing so would have put my new position at VectorCore in jeopardy. These individuals were exceptionally gifted and deserved to be led more effectively and given more opportunity for training. I told Trevor that although I wish I could offer some guidance, you realize the circumstance that I am in. Have you given any thought to expanding your search for employment to other companies? Quite honestly, yeah. In the past week, Patricia Wells contacted me regarding a junior integration specialist position that is now available at VectorCore. Apparently, she had recommended me to her. I cracked a grin. Patricia had requested that I locate talented persons from my previous place of employment who would be interested in new chances. Because of his strong work ethic and eagerness to learn, I had especially addressed Trevor in my last sentence. It was my opinion that VectorCore is a good company. They make investments in their employees rather than regarding them as resources that can be used and recycled. My first month at VectorCore came to a close with the signing of contracts with 2 of the former clients of TriTech, and we were in the process of preparing proposals for 3 additional clients. Although it would take several months to finish the migration projects, the customer connections had already been established on the basis of demonstrations of superior technical skills and professional support. My termination from TriTech occurred exactly 3 months prior to the time that I received the call, which was on a Friday afternoon in November. Patricia came to my office and knocked on the door when I was in the process of evaluating the integration specs for a new client. A smirk appeared on her face as she informed Douglas that Gavin Norris was also present online. He claims that it is of the utmost importance. The phone was picked up by me. He is known as Douglas. Gavin said without hesitation, "Douglas, I am calling to inform you that Meridian Analytics has acquired TriTech Solutions." He did not provide any additional context. It was a defeated, lifeless tone in his voice. All assets, customer contracts, and intellectual property are included in the acquisition, which will take effect immediately. I sat back in my chair and pondered the matter while I processed the facts. Congratulations, considering that this appears to be a substantial development. Gavin proceeded by saying that the new ownership has made a request for a thorough examination of all of the organization's operational procedures and technical systems. During the course of that process, we discovered that our existing infrastructure and support capabilities have a few limitations. The fact that Meridian Analytics had grown weary of waiting for TriTech to restore its malfunctioning systems and had made the decision to buy the company completely, rather than terminate their service contract, was something that he did not mention. Compared to the legal fees that they would have paid if they had fought against accusations of breach of contract, it was undoubtedly more affordable. "I am aware," I responded. "It has been particularly requested by the new management team that you be approached about returning to oversee the process of technical transition, according to Gavin. They are ready to make you an offer for a senior director position, which would give you complete control over the integration of systems and the connections with vendors." As I peeked out the window of my office, I noticed that my co-workers were leaving for the weekend and heading to the parking lot of VectorCorp. Good people who were engaged in meaningful work in an atmosphere that recognized and appreciated their accomplishments. "Gavin, that is an intriguing offer, but I have stated that I am quite content with the position that I am currently holding. When it comes to my professional growth, VectorCorp has been a very supportive company." There was a significant lull in the conversation. "I would like to point out to you, Douglas, that I am aware that there were errors committed in the manner in which your departure was handled. In the event that you were willing to come back, we could talk about making considerable improvements to your remuneration and improving the working circumstances. I was responsible for ensuring that TriTech's systems ran efficiently for a period of 19 years, during which time management took credit and pocketed earnings. In light of the fact that their short-sighted efforts to cut costs had almost brought the company to its knees, they requested that I return to rectify their errors. Gavin, I am grateful for the appreciation, but I have stated that there are some decisions that cannot be reversed. I pray that the changeover goes off without a hitch for everyone connected to it. 6 months later, Patricia came by with a bottle of champagne when I was sitting in my Vector Corp office studying quarterly performance reports. I was in the middle of my work. She congratulated me, Douglas, as she placed the bottle on my desk. During our conversation, the elevation to Chief Integration Officer that you requested was just granted by the board. Your team has successfully moved 12 clients who were previously with TriTech to our platform, and the levels of satisfaction reported by those clients have reached an all-time high. I gave her a friendly grin and shook her hand. I am grateful to you. An enriching experience has been gained from this. Patricia failed to reveal the fact that Vector Corp had, in a span of 8 months, effectively captured the entirety of TriTech's regional market share. TriTech's operations had been temporarily stabilized as a result of Meridian Analytics' acquisition of the company. Nevertheless, the majority of customers had already made the choice to migrate to service providers as a result of the acquisition. Over the course of 4 months, Trevor had joined the integration team at Vector Corp, and he was swiftly evolving into a proficient systems specialist. My experience was complemented by his new insights, and we collaborated effectively on difficult migration tasks. He brought new perspectives to the table. The irony was that I was now performing precisely the same tasks that I had performed at TriTech, but with much higher income, resources that were significantly better, and management that was significantly more supportive. Vector Corp was aware that experienced technical professionals were assets that should be developed rather than expenses that should be lowered through cost reduction. While I was driving past the old TriTech office building the previous week, I saw that 50% of the parking spots were still vacant. Although the company continued to exist under Meridian's ownership, it was nothing near as successful as it had been during the 19 years that I worked there. The decision that Gavin made to terminate my employment no longer caused me to feel feelings of rage. The opportunity to locate a better position with a company that acknowledged my efforts was actually made possible by his short-sighted approach to workforce efficiency. I was able to take advantage of this opportunity. Sometimes the most effective form of retribution is to achieve success in another area. When everything was said and done, competence always finds its appropriate worth, and I had at long last discovered mine.